Okay, in the last segment we showed you the medium that we're using for our blueberry mix. And so here it is, reasonably well mixed together. Again, about 80% peat moss. That is about 4 number 5 containers of peat moss, and then 1 number 5 container where we did compost, worm castings, and the rest perlite. And so our medium is ready to go. It's evenly moist already. So here's our pot that we're going to use, and when I'm putting something in a pot as a permanent home, you want to make sure, of course, it has a drainage hole, which this pot does. That's a prerequisite. You'll also notice that it's been treated on the inside a little bit for waterproofing purposes. That'll just help the plant or the pot last longer, which is important or not, depending on, you know, whatever your thoughts are on the matter. Is that stuff toxic? Yeah, it might be. So if you were concerned about that, then go ahead and take a deeper look into things. I've done some research onto the pressure treated wood, and I sort of know how that stuff works, and this works about the same, so I'm not too concerned about it. But just any root that grows near the perimeter is potentially going to have more, you know, chemicals in it. But so here, let's get on to another subject. That's something you can look into on your own if you want. So hold your breath. Don't want to breathe in the perlite. That looks about right. So all I'm doing with this perlite is I just want to make a layer. You don't generally want layers, you know, when you're potting stuff up, but here's a layer that's going to provide drainage. You know, some people are going to use, you know, rocks or whatever, but that makes your pot ridiculously heavy. So use perlite. It doesn't really break down. So there's one piece of weed cloth on the bottom, another piece of weed cloth going to go right here. Something about like so. So I just have a layer at the bottom that's going to provide for, you know, some drainage, and I won't have a waterlogged plant, and a waterlogged plant is typically a dead plant, as you know. So let's go ahead and just put a little bit of our potting media in there, and I'm going to flare this back so that the edges of the weed fabric are against the edges of the pot. All right, so don't worry about the center for right now. Just get it along the edges, because then we want to be able to just shovel it in and be a little bit quicker. So I'm gonna go ahead and, you know, of course, get this as close as you can, and I could probably get a little bit closer, but it is what it is. So something about like so. And now we check. So get that up against the edges, little mini compaction. Now here's where I'm going to show you the dummy pot technique. So here's our dummy pot. Notice it is the same as the pot that the blueberry comes in. So the height of the soil in the pot that we're going to actually use goes to about the same, you know, to the height. Make note of that height, where the soil line is. This goes into our pot then. So I want that actually just a tad bit lower. It's easy to raise it, it's harder to lower it. So err on the side of it being a little bit low, and you can always add a little bit more material to the very bottom to raise it up. That's a little bit too low. Like that maybe. Looks about right. About right there. Relatively centered in the pot. Okay. So now that I've got my dummy pot in there, go ahead and add your potting medium. And I fill the dummy pot gets filled in just so that it doesn't you know, collapse under the pressure of the potting media going around it. You can also just sort of pour it on the top too, be a little bit more indiscriminate. If you've filled it all the way to the brim, you can just go a little faster, but you know, I left a little bit there, but no big deal. So just boom. And every once in a while, people have different theories on compacting or not, but you know, remember, a dry root is a dead root. In the ground, you definitely want to compact to like a pretty uniform area. In the pot, it's a little less critical, but I still do, you know, I'm doing a little bit of compaction. A little bit. At the end, I'll just clear that out. So then, Okay. Let's check, see how we're doing. So that looks pretty good. You can always add a little bit more once the root ball is in. So I'm going to go ahead and call that good. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that's nice and firm. This material's moist, so it's going to hold the shape really, really well. So before I pull that out, the goal is then to minimize the amount of time that the root ball is, not supported. And other people do different things, but in general, I don't break apart the root ball unless the plant or tree is really root bound. So if the plant has been stepped up at a respectful, respectful increments, then there really isn't a need to break apart the root ball. That's my opinion. Other people feel differently, and you can form your own opinion. That's a key part of all this. Is I don't think any of us are really truly plant whisperers. So just get a variety of inputs, learn from the legends in your area, and what's worked for them over the years will probably work for you too. And we don't need that anymore. So notice I've taken the sort of the nursery tape off of this plant because I want to see what it wants to do once it starts to bush out. It's had a heading cut right here, so you see the line tailing, no problem. So that looks, it's about balanced as it is. Obviously it needs to leaf out, but that works. So I'm going to go ahead and sort of finesse this a little bit and get it so that it's going to come out of this pot. So that's going to come out of this pot, whether it wants to or not. So that's ready to go. We come over here, and you can see we're going to go ahead and slide this out. Voila. Voila. You could add a little bit of fertilizer right there if you wanted to, but I've already added just a little bit of fertilizer in my potting media. So now it's time to figure out orientation, which I've already done. Seems to be about balanced either way, so not too crucial. And let's minimize the time that our root ball is in transit. This one's a little bit challenging for where to grab onto, but there we go. And about like so, and just like a glove, boom. Pretty much perfect. It's leaning a little bit, I guess, but the plants do that. So that looks good, doesn't it? So there's that dummy pot technique. That'll save you, especially avocados. Avocados are great trees to do that with. They have very sensitive root systems, so just be cautious. Here we go. Let's fill in the rest. This is a feed scooper. The cool thing about this is I always say it, this is my line. You can use it if you want, but I have the volume of a shovel and the precision of using my hands. And sometimes that's a good thing. So the volume of a shovel scoop, but I have the precision of being able to place it with my hands. So let's take a look at how we did. Now blueberries you actually do from cuttings. So if I leave a little bit of, the trunks, if you will, covered, it's not the end of the world. I'm not trying to, but anything that goes from cutting, don't worry about burying it just a little bit. Because if the wood goes into contact with, a moist medium, it's going to grow more roots. So anyway, just another little tip out there, checking us out on Suburban Food Farm. Website is currently sucks. Don't worry about that. I'm out there busy doing other things that matter. So that looks pretty good. Now, being in this pot, don't have a lot of organic material. That's the blend that we have is not high in organic material. So therefore you can do compost teas all day long, but this is a very specialized medium. So, compost tea is a good thing, but in this it's not going to be as helpful just because there isn't the organic. So what I'm going to do is I'm taking this right here, which is aged bark chips, compost, just sort of a blend of stuff. I get it from a pile in the yard that's just sort of passively composting. So this is the mulch I'm going to use. Got a little bit left there in case I need it. And I'm going to go ahead and just move that around and get this thing mulched. It's towards the top. I'd prefer to have it just be a little bit less high, give me a little more room for watering, but it will settle just a little bit when I water. And so ideally not the bark there. Most fungi would be okay, but don't want to get it next to the main trunks at all. So about like so. Take a little bit out, just a little bit more. So my goal is to have a little bit of a more rough type bark on the top, because then the water will percolate through it quickly, and it'll keep like an insulating blanket layer between the soil medium, which is really moist, and the air, which can be occasionally dry here. So you want the water to percolate down through a little layer of mulch. So, you know, not a thick layer of mulch we just did, but just a layer of mulch nonetheless. So that looks pretty good. You want to make sure that you label your plant. You want to know what it is, so take a photo or whatever you need to do, put a label on. But let's water in and out. We got some rainwater that I've captured, so we're going to put some rainwater on there, and that'll go in. Got a little bit more rainwater over here. And I'll probably add a little bit more water. But there is then our blueberry planted in a container, and this is a real nice one. It's a star blueberry, one of my favorites for taste. Not the most prolific one all the time, but it's definitely a really, really delicious one. And this blueberry bush should be really happy here. And be free, Mr. Blueberry Bush or Mrs. Blueberry Bush. So that's it. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ben Kotnik. Check out your local CRFG, your local community college. Take some classes, get to know the gardeners in your area, exchange knowledge. That knowledge goes with you everywhere. It weighs absolutely nothing, and no one can ever take it away from you. So knowledge is power. Learn how to grow your own food, and self-reliance is a good value for all of us to go in that direction. I dedicate this one to my mom, Sally. Love you, Sally. Love you, Mom. And there's our bush. Take care. Bye.